The idea of retreating is like pulling back, and 5-MeO is really doing the opposite. It's awakening to life. It's stepping towards life, stepping into sensitivity, to open-heartedness, to tender-heartedness, to full presence with every moment of our lives. That is an orientation we hope to help people discover for themselves in their own way and express it in their own way. Awakening to life is really about awakening to the gift of life, to awakening to the gift that every moment offers.
Welcome to Modern Psychedelics, where we explore the transformations made possible through intentional engagement with psychedelics. This podcast will help you integrate high consciousness living into the everyday and deepen the work ignited by altered states. You can expect balanced and grounded conversations around therapeutic, ceremonial, and recreational containers. My name is Lana Pribic, your host and guide. I am a 3-time certified professional life coach, and I work with people who want to integrate higher levels of consciousness into their daily lives so they can feel more peace, fulfillment, and connection. After all, our time here on Earth is so brief, so let's make sure we're really living. The song you hear is called Lost Horizon by Peace Sign. All right, let's journey. Setting aside the time, energy, and money for a full psychedelic experience can be a lot. That's why I love Kanna. It's a gentle ally for daily support that actually gives results. Kanna is a succulent from South Africa that has been traditionally used by indigenous communities such as the Khoi and the San people for mood enhancement, stress relief, and spiritual practices. Kanna is an empathogen, so it helps emphasize feelings of connectedness, open-heartedness, and calm. It also happens to be pretty well researched. In fact, one of the active alkaloids in Kanna is prescribed as a pharmaceutical for anxiety and depression. The best part is that it's completely legal in North America and sold as a health product. But the Kanna supplements you'll find in stores is table grade, so they're not active in the alkaloids that make a difference. Kanna Extract Co. is leading the way in creating quality, potent extracts. Their signature extraction process ensures absolute purity and precise alkaloid profiles. For you, this means unparalleled potency and the amazing felt effects. If you want to learn more about this plant medicine, check out episode 74 with Ryan Luttrell. Kanna Extract Co. also ethically sources their medicine, working with growers who uphold benefit sharing agreements with traditional knowledge keepers, and we love that. Start your journey with Kanna today. Visit kannaextract.com and you can use Lana at checkout to save 10%. That's Kanna Extract, Kanna extract.com, and use Lana, Lana, at checkout to save 10% off your first order. All right, back to the episode. Hello. Today's episode is a deep dive into the world of 5-MeO, DMT, the experience, the integration process, and some of the common insights and life shifts that people can expect from this medicine. This is the second time that I am interviewing Steve Rio of Enfold, a 5-MeO DMT center. If you are completely new to the world of 5-MeO DMT and you want to learn more about the 101 around the medicine, I recommend checking out episode 8 with Steve, which was recorded 3 years ago, and leaning into that one first before listening to this one. This episode is much deeper. We don't really cover the basics. We jump right off into the deep end, as I had just shared in episode 79, my trip report at Enfold, where Steve and his wife Austin held space for me to experience this incredibly powerful medicine. We recorded this conversation in late January, so I was 2 months into my integration process at a time when I was really awakening to how powerful 5-MeO DMT was for me and how long and intense and all encompassing the integration experience was. Our guest today, Steve, has such a mature and deep understanding of 5-MeO as a medicine and the way that it really impacts one's life and the overall experience of it. I find that Steve really has no walls when he speaks, and I have spent one-on-one time with him very intimately when I visited their center, but I also feel that this comes through when I listen to him speak when I'm interviewing him and also in other interviews. I feel that he really embodies this medicine, and that is the voice of love. It's a very humble and earnest energy that he embodies. And I feel that whenever he speaks, it's just coming from this place of purity, clarity, and love, which is such a reflection of this medicine. I could honestly listen to him talk about 5-MeO and awakening and life for hours. I just think he's an incredibly interesting human. And it's such a treat to have him back on the show and be even more embedded in the modern psychedelics community. He's such a beautiful speaker, and he's really just speaking straight from the heart. So you're in for a real treat today. Steve Rio is the co-founder of Enfold. He is a transformational performance coach, psychedelic guide, spiritual teacher, musician, entrepreneur, and investor. His life work focuses on raising consciousness and helping people realize their full potential. Steve sits on the board of Therasil, is an advisor to Numinous, Holos Global, and Nikian Foundation. As you can see, Steve is on a very similar path to myself and all the work that I'm doing. And I just absolutely cherish the alignment between us and our work. In this episode, we really get into the nuances of the 5-MeO DMT experience. We spend a lot of time dissecting, trying to make sense of something that cannot be made sense of, which is the non-dual experience that 5-MeO at high doses does invoke. We talk about the specifics around the somatic and nervous system aspect of this medicine. With most psychedelics, people are very focused on the visionary aspects, but 5-MeO is so incredibly somatic. It's energetic. It's energy medicine. We talk about that. I share about my integration process and the reactivations that I've been having, which have been quite intense. So hang on until the kind of tail end of the episode where I share two pretty intense stories of pretty intense reactivations that I've had a month and 2 months out of the experience. One thing is for sure is that this is a very serious medicine. And as Steve says in this conversation, you cannot play around with this medicine. This conversation is raw and clear, just like 5-MeO. I so appreciate it sitting down with Steve and dropping in this way. It's such an honor to bring this forth to you. Enjoy this episode and please share it with a friend or a family member, anyone in your network who might benefit from being exposed to this information. Sending you lots of love directly from my heart to yours, and I will catch you on the other side. Hello, everyone. So I am here with Steve Rio. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you. It's so cool to be back. Excited for this conversation.
Me too, especially because we have such a rapport now, and we've been through quite an intense process together where you saw me through my own 5-MeO ceremony. So yeah, I think the listeners are going to be in for just such a treat today. Before we get started, can you just give us a little intro to yourself and the work that you're doing in the world?
Sure. My name is Steve Rio. We live on a small island outside of Vancouver. When I say we, I mean my wife, Austin, and I. We're the co-founders of Enfold. We've been in life partnership for 13 years, coming on 14 years, and working together, building Enfold for the last 5 or so. And it's been a really incredible process for us, both personally and professionally and in all ways possible. This has been one of the most challenging and revealing and beautiful experiences of service that we've ever had in our lives. So I'm sure we'll get into what that all means. But my background, I've been in business. I've been a musician, an artist since really my teen years, very much interested in spirituality and psychology and understanding this great mystery as much as one can. So it's been a long journey.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that you've been building Enfold for 5-6 years now, because you can really feel how much intention and just how much process has gone into the building of it. I think that's very felt, and all your gifts and Austin's gifts really come through in that. I think it's been about 3 years since you've last been on the podcast. And it's funny, I was listening to one of your you were a guest on a recent episode of, what was that podcast name?
Business Trip.
Yeah. Great interview. I was like, damn, I have to top that. It was such a good conversation. But as I was listening to you and after spending more time with you, I've really come to understand that I think your authority and your understanding around 5-MeO as a medicine has really matured and blossomed since we last spoke. It was already in such a beautiful place. But yeah, I think over these last 3 years, you've really come into such a beautiful understanding of the medicine. And yeah, Enfold is obviously a little more above ground now than it was last time we talked. So yeah, just over these last 3 years since you've been on Modern Psychedelics, what's changed for you and Enfold?
Everything continues to reveal itself through this process, and we're hundreds of ceremonies deeper into our work. And with that just comes continually new learnings, new integrations for us, a broader community, and I would say a wider demographic of people coming to see us. So we start to see how this medicine interacts with people of different types. I think the other big thing that's shifted a lot is our process just continues to evolve and deepen in terms of how we actually see this work playing out, not just in the retreat format or in the experience format, but all of the preparation work has developed a lot since we last spoke, all of the integration work we in process and structure, and just our capacity and capability to handle diverse cases with different people, because integration looks very different for different people. And so we continually learn, but I think we have a even stronger grounding underneath our work, which is really, it feels really good. And I'll just say that I think this is just continued learning. There's so much more. We used to joke that to make people feel comfortable before the ceremony, we would say, don't worry, we've seen everything. If you scream or if you freak out, however you respond to the medicine, don't worry, we've seen it all. And the truth is, like, people continually surprise us with their responses because people are so unique in their expression. And so we continue to learn while seeing sort of the meta levels and seeing the archetypes evolving of the different types of people that come to see us. There's so much uniqueness, and that's very rich.
Yeah, I loved the integration and preparation offerings that you've been developing. And that's a bit newer, yeah? The website with all the offerings.
Yeah, we launched our website about a year ago now, and it took a solid year to develop the content for that. And we just continue to think about how to evolve it. Yeah.
So supportive. And yeah, I have a bit of a selfish question because I feel like it's going to help me with my integration and then also help anyone else listening who is also integrating 5-MeO. But it's a really, interesting one to wrap one's head around. So I'm about 2 months out now, and it's still a bit like mysterious and unfolding. But I guess when you discovered 5-MeO, you had already been working with different medicines and psychedelics and plants. Obviously, there was something about 5-MeO that really drew you in that the others weren't able to accomplish. And I'm feeling that as well right now. Like, I feel like there's something about this medicine that is just so different than any of the other psychedelics or plants that I've experienced. So yeah, I would love to just hear from you, reflecting back on the early stages of working with 5. What was it that really drew you in so much that you've really dedicated a huge portion of your life to serving this medicine?
One aspect of it was just how direct it was, and how in almost every other popular psychedelic, it's this long journey where you're in the mind working and you're exploring story, and it's very psychological. And 5-MeO, it's almost like it just bypasses all of that and goes directly into the body, into the nervous system, and works on a whole different level. And coming out of it, what you're speaking to, I think, on the integration point is that integration is so different with 5-MeO, because I think with other psychedelics, part of the integration process is in the ceremony itself. You're making connections, you're putting things together. The most intense parts of it are generally in the ceremony itself, where I think with 5-MeO, it's very intense, obviously, and there can be very intense periods for weeks and months after, as you've experienced a bit. But I think we were drawn to it because of how direct it was, how it really connected with the work we had been doing in meditation and Buddhism and around awakening and around non-dual states. Like, it's got a very particular characteristic about being able to bring about non-dual experiences. And then I think the other piece, when we began working with this medicine, we started looking around for who are the experts, and there's a few, but there's also a lot of open space in this medicine. There's not a long lineage, and it felt like a really interesting opportunity to provide this blank canvas for people that didn't necessarily have to subscribe to 2,000 years of lineage from any one religion or culture. It was very simple in a certain way, which we appreciated. I think the last thing is just that our first experience with this medicine was unlike anything we've ever had, where there was very clearly a before and after state for us both. And in some ways, it opened a process that we're still in many years later. And it also confirmed certain things that I had been seeing in my intuition since I was a teenager. It reconfirmed some things and showed me some things that no other medicine had. So
I have chills as you're just talking about that. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
What did it confirm for you? Can you share a little bit about that?
I think the simplest way to say it is that it confirmed God. And that sounds really intense for a lot of people because it's a triggering word. And if you don't like that word, you could replace it with any word you like, but it confirmed that we are part of something much greater. And it confirmed my interconnectedness to all things. It gave me my very first experience gave me a very clear download. Like it was just absolute truth that this is all one experience. This entire universe is built in perfection. And it helped to explain some of what lots of people talk about around manifesting and how our psyche is, and our consciousness is connected to all of the information in the universe and all this kind of stuff that sounds like really out there and really kind of woo-woo kind of stuff. But it like really confirmed some core beliefs around this interconnection to all things. And it was just something I can't unsee. It really confirms something very deep. And I'm still learning to articulate it many years later. But that's the best way I can do it now. Anyway, ask me again in 5 years.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. As I've been integrating this experience, one of the things that came to me was like, how differently would everyone in the world walk around and treat each other and live their lives if they were, certain that there was a greater power, a greater love, a greater source, a greater energy that connects us all and that we are all from and that we all return to. Like
Right.
How different, and I'm still learning like how different my life will be now with that felt experience.
Yeah. And it's such a profound knowing that you're shown. And then the work of 5-MeO is spending perhaps the rest of your life trying to live in accordance with that knowing, because there's so much about our ego and about our conditioning that tells us that that's not true and that we're actually have to be separate or that we have to protect ourselves or that we can't love unconditionally. And so part of the tension coming out of 5-MeO is often this very deep knowing and this huge resistance in our psyche and in our ego and in our conditioning, right? And it's a very complex process. It can be very full of tension in integration. There's a lot of people who serve this medicine or talk about this medicine saying, oh, everyone should just experience that and then everything will be different. Experiencing it is just the beginning. And in fact, for some people, it creates such a whiplash in the ego that they become even more isolated. They become even more entrenched in their fear because they snap back into fear even with more strength. So it's a continued practice to step into that level of awakening that is, I think, very much a lifelong practice.
Yeah. And a lot of it is like, what do you do with that non-dual experience when we do live in such a dual world? Earth is not a realm of non-duality. It's very much a world of duality. And what I love about your approach and Austin's approach at Enfold and why I was so drawn to do this work with you in particular is due to just how human and grounded your approach is to work with a medicine that is, ethereal and just like pure energy. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what your approach is to life here on Earth, like both as just like Steve living his life, but also Steve facilitating 5-MeO ceremonies? What's your approach to that, to integrate that eternal essence that 5-MeO lets us become momentarily with our limited time in this dual existence? Just a little question for you.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just ground that in. I think, so you're right. You said, what's this mean for Steve walking around and Steve serving 5-MeO? I think it's the same thing, is that when you really get the message that we are all interconnected and that this whole dual experience is, whether it's illusory or whether it's just a glimpse of life, it's like this expression of life and you're experiencing it. Whatever it is, it's like, it's a gift, and to not take everything so seriously, to really see that this is an opportunity to experience life and to practice and to explore and to be loving. And two, that when you realize that we are all part of one life, then the ultimate offering is to be in service to that life, to be in service and to continually practice orienting yourself towards service. And that's what Enfold is. Like, that is one of the major shifts that happened coming out of this medicine, was realizing that everything else we were doing was less important, and that to step into this was an ultimate act of service. And we gave up. We both had companies that we sold, and we were making a lot more money, and things were very different. Of course, we took care to take care of ourselves and not to be crazy about, like, too high risk about things. But this was definitely an act of service. And I think the way to ground this experience of connectedness to all is to say, okay, back into this life, oh man, I've only got another 50, 60 years if I'm lucky. So what a gift. Like, how can I just live into these next 50, 60 years as beautifully as I can? And how can I be in as much service as I can? Then it's the constant personal work of noticing when I'm getting in my own way of doing those things.
I feel that about realizing that it's an invitation to experience life, right? While we are here, we may as well fully experience it in this form. I deeply felt that as well. And then, okay, how do you want to experience it?
In some ways, it skips past a tremendous amount of work that would typically lead to this type of awakening experience. So in some ways, 5-MeO, I feel like it gives you this glimpse into what is actually possible and what is actually going on here. But then it's like seeing the last page of the book and waking up in the middle of the book and having to then write the rest of the book to that last page. But there's a tremendous amount of work that goes along with that. And it can be really complicated, and it can be challenging to have seen that and then to arrive back in your mind and in your body, and to have to work through the unraveling of conditioning and seeing through the illusion of some of that conditioning, yet still acting in certain ways. And it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I will just say, I've completely had like arguments and like snapped and all of that good human stuff since the 5 experience. And it's not that I was expecting any type of miraculous transformation, but as you are sharing, there is a greater noticing of it. There is a greater awareness of it. There is a greater, almost like it feels more frustrating to behave in that way and to be in that way when I know that whatever I'm doing to this person, I'm also doing to myself.
Yeah. You feel that misalignment more viscerally, right? And I think if we speak in the language of parts work, which is very popular, something we're studying as well, I think it loosens up all these parts of our personality. So we are more volatile coming out of this experience. Things are closer to the surface. Our sensitivities, we are more sensitive in general. And so it's a very interesting exploration to feel more bliss and more joy and more expression, and to also sometimes feel more like bigger bursts of anger or aggression or other emotions that are also amplified. It opens the entire energetic system. It doesn't just tap into your happiness. You can't just have joy without having the contrasting feelings and expressions that are also part of your personality system and part of your energetic system. So it is being comfortable and being ready to start working with all of those. And it can be somewhat volatile for a while, for sure.
Yeah. And it also feels like almost embarrassing to admit that, I had this huge spiritual awakening experience and I still lose my shit at my dad.
Right.
It's totally embarrassing, but it's also real and human. And that's what's happening. And the integration is recognizing that tension and choosing what I want to do with it. That's what I'm learning.
I think that's really beautifully said. And what you said before is just the noticing. I find that for a lot of people, the deepened awareness that people come away from this experience with, and this can happen in other types of personal work as well, you gain a deeper sense of awareness of your behavior. And it feels like a step backwards almost, because now you're just noticing what you may have otherwise done unconsciously. You're now conscious to it,
Yes.
which is progress. It's just painful progress. It's the painful part of it. Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to do it 3, 5, 50 times. And then you finally go, you know what? I am ready to go solve this now, or I'm ready to go heal this part of me now.
I trust that's what's happening. I want to talk a little bit more about this non-dual aspect of the experience. First question, just a clarifying question. Is it guaranteed that if you dose high enough, 5-MeO will take you to a non-dual experience?
I would say 98% of the time, 99% of the time. There are outliers. What we can see sometimes is just people's egoic resistance can be so intense that they are able to withstand it at all costs, like at all levels of intensity. But generally, yes. And then there's also a lot of people that it's either too much information, it's too confronting to their conditioning, and there's a lot of people call it a blackout or a whiteout, where there's just no memory. And there's no memory of a non-dual experience. We can talk about that in a sec, but that a big component of the experience is just completely wiped out, even stuff that a lot of people would bring back with them. So I think it's just yes, in general, yes. And there's a few caveats.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly where I wanted to go with the whiteout and the non-dual experience. I'm trying to wrap my head around it because I don't remember having a non-dual experience because I wasn't there to experience it or to witness it. But I'm quite certain that I had one, because when I started coming back, it was like the aftershock of that unitive experience. What is going on there? Is it possible to recall a non-dual experience if there's no awareness there to observe it and then to remember it?
Yeah, that's probably a question above my pay grade, but
it's a mystery. It's the great mystery.
Talk to some monks in caves, but that's what I mentioned. The second component of what I mentioned is that as you're coming back from a non-dual experience, you hit some threshold where you begin to have awareness again. And you're so close to that experience, like you just described as well. You're so close to that experience that there can be this tremendous download. I was lucky enough to have that in my first experience. And the only way I could describe it was seeing the entire universe at once. It was like going to a movie, seeing the entire universe at once. And all it was a white screen, and it was 0 seconds long, and it was silent, but it was everything. And it's very complex, and whatever that means. But I was able to download the feeling of that and the knowing of that. But I think for some people, as they're coming back into that awareness, it is so intense and so chaotic, and their mind starts to grasp for other things right away, that momentary opportunity there for those downloads just isn't possible. And there can also be a lot of layers of trauma that come up in the psyche connected to that experience. Because I would say that experience, though, of course, no one can ever describe it if they're not there for it. To me, it's the experience of pure love, of pure connectivity, of pure connection. And all of our trauma is what creates distance between us and that knowing of pure love. And so I think for some people, as they're re-entering into time and space, the first thing that arises in their psyche is these deeply traumatic energies or feelings or thoughts that, again, immediately push away that download and make it very difficult to grasp. So some people do not have the advertised beautiful white light unity experience. That's just not for everybody. And I wouldn't say it's something that even needs to be grasped for. It's always a blessing when it happens, but there's so much value in the experience without it too. It just happens to be that for some they have that experience, and for others they don't. And that's okay.
Can a 5-MeO experience be dark and scary?
Yeah. It can be really dark and really scary. I would say it's not super common, but for some, the entire session is super hard, very sticky, very dark, terror-filled. It can be exceptionally confronting and challenging. Yes. It can be just like an absolute existential struggle. I'd say it's rare that's the entirety of someone's experience, but often I would say it's fairly common that it might be part of the person's experience, a third of the person's experience, or some component of it, that they experience sheer terror or very challenging aspects throughout the experience. Because to the ego, to the mind, this process of moving into non-duality is the process of dying. It is the process of no longer existing. That ego has been around since you were while born or maybe before born. And it's been trying to create a picture of the world to keep you safe and to keep you moving through it in this dual experience. Like, we do need our egos, but our egos have been doing their best to keep things out of frame for you so that you can stay focused. And a lot of that isn't necessarily helpful psychologically because it's fear-based. And these are the things we are trying to do when we're in our healing processes to clear some of those. But this is a process of shredding those away, of ripping that away. It's just like awakening. It's a destructive process, right? To some degree.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me when you take plant medicine like ayahuasca or iboga, often before the medicine enters and activates in your body, you have a physical purge, right? You either vomit or go to the bathroom. It almost seems 5-MeO has a very similar process, but with 5, the release is very somatic and energetic. And yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, those auditory and physical releases that I experienced and that seem to be common, is that the way that the medicine is entering and activating within you and allowing you to ascend out of your physical form and have that non-dual experience. What do you think?
You say that again? I'm processing that.
Yeah.
Say that for me again.
Yeah. So you know how with most plant medicine, you'll have the physical purge before the medicine activates within you. Is 5-MeO's version of that, those auditory nervous system physical releases so that the medicine can like fully activate within you.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I've never really considered that because that makes sense the way you're describing it. And at the same time, it seems like the energetic purging of 5-MeO, like in the non-dual state, that's when the body just fully releases. It's almost just, you open the entire nervous system and it just starts releasing. And that can be purging. People definitely vomit and other things. It's not as common with 5-MeO, but it can happen. But I don't know how those relate to, I'm not really, because I haven't really considered, for instance, ayahuasca and the purging, like what aspect, how does the purging fit into the rest of the experience? I've never really compared the two, to be honest. Yeah. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. 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 It was just something that kind of came up for me as I was processing my experience. It was like, it almost felt like those, especially in the lighter dose, it almost felt like the auditory purge was like the way that the medicine was trying to attempt to get rid of whatever my body didn't need in order to connect me to the medicine or the state that it wanted to go to.
Yeah, there's this aspect of 5. It's so interesting because it's such a somatic experience. And at the non-dual state, there's no you and no body, almost like you're connected to all things. It's pure consciousness. And then you're arriving back in the body. So there is this, both are true and both are happening. And yeah, I'm not sure if the purging is required to get there or if it's just because suddenly the ego and control mechanism is let down. And that's what the body, like our physical expression, would naturally be without any control, without all this conditioning saying you can't make that noise, you can't shake your body like that, you can't scream. To me, it's like this compressed energy that's been stored in our body for so long and it finally gets to release itself. I just think the 5-MeO is strong enough and direct enough that it gets all the way to that point where it just feels very natural to start making sound and to moving the body. And you were so comfortable in your experience dropping straight into that even from the lightest dose. But for a lot of people, the first couple doses are much more of a struggle where the ego is still trying to keep them calm and keep everything safe and don't make too much noise and don't embarrass yourself. And there is a real struggle there for people that we're hoping that we can create enough comfort that they work through. And it's also part of the learning and the medicine to experience, oh, this is where I'm holding. And this is the edge of my, like the tension of how hard I grip onto things.
Starting with identity. Yeah. I experienced a bit of that with my reactivation, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that later. Let's talk about this nervous system and the somatics that are going on. I was so shocked at how somatic 5-MeO DMT is and not psychedelic in the traditional sense. And I even made a post on my Instagram. It was a clip from the episode that I did talking about how I was so surprised that it wasn't visual. And in the comments, there was a lot of people saying, what are you talking about? 5-MeO DMT is so visual. Yeah. So I wanted you to, just talk about that a little bit, like the somatic aspect of it and where the visual aspect of 5-MeO kind of fits in with that. Because for me, I feel like the somatic release and the nervous system work was like the main event, and the visuals were just like there in the background a little bit, but not very present. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about like the somatic and nervous system aspect of 5-MeO DMT?
Yeah. And some people have more of a visual experience than others. And there's probably some brain chemistry, or there's probably just some unique aspects of the way we metabolize, or who knows what creates that. But I do think that with the right orientation, and I think this is probably true for other medicines, that when we can bring awareness into the sensations of the body and the experience, and allow the visuals to, if they're there, to just be there, but not to bring our focus to them, that we bring focus to the energy, the energetic expression, that there's a lot more potential there. But 5-MeO definitely has a unique characteristic in that it's unlike anything I've really experienced, where it just seems to go straight into the body, where the body just opens up immediately. And I also think that through our work over the years, we've shaped our orientation, and we're preparing people for that. We're contextualizing that for people, so that when they get to the mat with us, that is already their orientation, and that they're able to bring awareness to that. Because I think most people who do 5 aren't told that. So it's very easy for the mind to look for distractions during the experience. Wow, look at the fireworks. Wow, this is so crazy, and this is so bright, and whatever. Like, that's far easier than feeling the incredible depth of energetic expression coming from the body. So I think for some, it's actually just a distraction, the visual aspect of it. That said, it is different for different people, but I think a lot of people report 0. They didn't see anything. Like, some people don't even see the first fractaling of the experience. It just goes straight to the black or straight to white. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no content within the 5-MeO experience, but it's more of something to just experience. And how do you guys work with that? The lack of content, and then integrating that into whatever healing people are looking for, which is full of content.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing for a lot of people to reckon with, because naturally our mind likes to see a linear process happen, and you come in going, yeah, I want to unlock my creativity and feel more confident and maybe be less reactive with my partner, or whatever. They have these terrestrial things that they're working on in their life. And then this experience is just this huge energy explosion, and sometimes this download of this huge interconnected universe that we're part of. And so we're often just reminding people, don't expect to get direct answers to the questions you have, because likely the answers are going to be 3 or 4 layers deeper than that. And sometimes there is no intellectual answer at all during the ceremony. It's pure energy. It's purely somatic. And that's when we started the conversation a little bit around integration. That's part of the challenge with 5-MeO, is that it's not like you're sitting there connecting the dots going, oh yeah, I was like this because my mom was like that, and that's why I'm doing this, and that's why this behavior shows up, and here's how I can be a better person or more confident. Or there's really very little of that. I'd say that this medicine is going deeper than the layers of psychology, and we're going into the trauma that is stored in the body, which, in the best way I can describe it, and the best way we see it, is it becomes, it's like the energy system in our body becomes clogged up, and we become less sensitive, and we become less present, and we become less emotionally aware, and things become very dulled. And then in this experience, we release, it's like we clear these energy centers in the body, and suddenly we can feel our life with so much more depth and richness. We are so much more sensitive coming out of this experience. We're so much more in touch with our true self, which to me is this like immutable, timeless version of ourselves that has nothing to do with our psychology. There's just a deep knowing of and a deep peace that is within all of us. And so we're not adding that, we're just uncovering it, and we're recovering it in some ways. But then the work is after the fact, where we're then working in the layers of psychology. A lot of our psychology will come back, but if we can stay rooted, and we can use daily practice and remembrance to stay in remembrance of our ceremony and that deep knowing, then hopefully that can help orient us around behaviors that are not serving our highest self. So if our highest self is in connection with all other beings and is in service to life and love, then when we say things to ourselves or say things to others, or beliefs come up up that aren't in alignment with that, we can learn to heal those parts. But that becomes the psychological process. But that's really mostly after the fact. The ceremony itself is much more of just this. It's like cleaning the hardware and clearing the system in a way that allows for that to happen at a much deeper level. Now, I will say that for some people, there's deeply held traumas that simply clear, and we see phobias and we see like certain belief structures or physical symptoms that people were experiencing just no longer be there. And so that's also really powerful. When we reset the nervous system, there's this powerful clearing. In some cases, just things are no longer there that used to be there. A belief system, a deep fear, a certain feeling of anxiousness. Like one example for me is that I've always loved public speaking, and I used to play music and I was on stage a lot, but I would always get very nervous and I'd always get very in my head about it. And these days there's a certain level of underlying nervous system fear response that just isn't there for me anymore. Of course, I get nervous if I'm doing something that's important to me and I've worked on it hard, but it's just, there's a different level of base level amygdala fear that just isn't there for me anymore. It just isn't part of who I am anymore. I don't feel that level of that. Yeah, there's a certain level of uncontrollable nervousness or sweating or fear that it just doesn't happen anymore in my body. And that's not something I don't even think you can psychologically get to. It just cleared out of my system. So it's very interesting. So there's lots of layers to this, but I think ultimately the more we can focus on the somatic work during the process and then start to layer in the psychological and the spiritual understandings on top of that, that feels like the natural process.
So here's my not so secret. The number one tool in my toolkit, the thing that has changed my life for the better the most, aside from psychedelics, of course, is not therapy. It's not breath work. It's not meditation. It's not even the yoga I've been doing for 15 years. It's coaching. Because coaching is the most actionable tool that I have come across. A few years ago, I fired my therapist and hired a coach, and working with a coach helped me start moving in the direction I wanted to move. And I finally stopped feeling stuck. I fell so in love with coaching, even though I wanted to become a therapist at that time. I decided instead to get trained and certified as a professional coach. As a psychedelics informed life coach, I work with people who are on the psychedelic path, which is probably you if you're listening to this podcast. The Global Coaching Client Study from the International Coaching Federation shows most clients who work with a professional coach report improved work performance, more growth and opportunities, greater self-confidence, enhanced relationships, more effective communication skills, better work and life balance, and an improvement in wellness. According to the same study, 99% of people who were polled said that they were somewhat or very satisfied with the overall coaching experience. Coaching works. I see similar results amongst my clients every week. You can actually read their beautiful in-depth testimonials on my website at modernpsychedelics.net. Along with being psychedelics informed, my style is process oriented. We live in this outcome obsessed world where our default mode is to live life for the destination or the end result. But I have come to understand that the gifts are actually in the journey, and that's where we grow and learn and enjoy life the most. So that's why I equip my clients with tools and skills for the long game of life and the long game of medicine work. I'm currently onboarding new one-on-one clients into my coaching practice. So if this sounds like it would be supportive for where you're at, get in touch with me. I would love to hear from you. And you can click on the link in the show notes or head to modernpsychedelics.net/coaching. There's lots of info there for you along with those testimonials. I can't wait to connect with you. That's modernpsychedelics.net/coaching. Okay, let's go back to the episode. I love how just energetic it is. It's so energetic and it like goes like right to the energy first. And then it seems like the mind and the psychology has to catch up to that. And this is what I do as a core energy coach as well. We're always addressing the energy below the situation, the energy below the thoughts. So I love how 5-MeO seems to really go directly to the underlying, honestly, energy, like it's like energy medicine. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a best way to describe it. And when we think about so much of our core conditioning comes from the ages of 0 to 5, right? some of that's pre-language, before a time where we have any cognitive, rational structures around it. It's these core deep beliefs that are held, and some of them don't even have language around them, right? Like at 1 year old, we're left in the crib crying and we form this belief that we're alone. There's no like idea that what even alone is. It's a deep sense, it's a deep feeling, it's an energy that's held in the nervous system. And so a lot of what we're doing here is this resetting of the nervous system. And it's often, for a lot of people, it's this rebirthing experience where it's like you're coming back into the world and starting from zero in some ways. And a big part of what we're trying to do in those moments with people is to just create as much safety and as much love and as much welcoming energy and as much acceptance and unconditional joy for their presence, so that as they're coming back from that deep resetting, that deep rebirthing, that they're receiving what every child is wired for when they come out of the womb is just, I'm here, I am welcomed, I am safe, I am nurtured, I can express myself. If I scream, it's okay. If I laugh, it's okay. And just to give people that sense. And that's part of what we do over a number of days as well. That's why the multi-day process is so important.
Well, you do a very beautiful job of holding the space for that rebirth. I know you mentioned that in my ceremony, there was like this moment of rebirth. How do you, as a facilitator, spot that might be happening? And what are like the signs that like a rebirth, an energetic rebirth, a spiritual rebirth, whatever you want to call it, has taken place? And how does that show up in someone's life after?
At least from what we've seen, you almost physically see the person turn into a little baby. And it's like you can almost see them traveling through the birth canal and their hands are clenched up and the whole body clenches up. And oftentimes people will be holding their breath at that point, like everything. You just imagine like a tiny baby when they come out and they're all purple and clenched up, and then they come out and they gasp. They take that first breath and
Wow.
we physically see that all the time.
Wow.
This kind of process. And there's this sense that as people come back into the world and you just see them looking around with this level of awe and this level of wonder and this level of, like, when we're born, we don't have any labels. We don't have any judgment. We have no assumption about what anything is. We're simply in awe and in wonder of the world, right? We're just, wow, that's a bright, shiny object, and that's an interesting thing, and that's pretty, and we're just exploring the world. And that's the energy that people come back with. It's like an exceptional level of peace and of simplicity. And it's just a really beautiful process to witness. So it's actually quite a physical thing that you can see. And it looks, there's a few different ways it looks, but it very often, Austin and I will just look at each other with this knowing look, like, oh, here it is. Here's the rebirth. And then you're just there as doulas to welcome this creature back into the world. And it's such a beautiful process when that happens.
You mentioned sensitivity, and you talked about that.
Yeah.
You and Austin talked a lot about sensitivity during the retreat and how this medicine makes one more sensitive to life, really. Can you talk a little bit about why someone might want to become more sensitive to life? Because I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, I'm already so sensitive. I don't need to be more sensitive. I want to be less sensitive, especially because this world is already telling me that I'm so sensitive. What's the gift of sensitivity?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, because you're right. There's a lot of mixed messaging around that. I think that when we become sensitive to our life, it means that we can take in the richness of everything around us. And speaking of my own personal experience, like being able to feel love and connection in a way that wasn't possible before, because I had too many barriers up and I had too many layers protecting my heart. And when we reveal our heart and we reveal our tenderness and we become sensitive, it is work. It is challenging. It does require a level of ability to sit in discomfort that you're otherwise blocking yourself from. But when we cover up our heart to protect ourselves, we're also covering up our heart from loving connection, from deep relationships, from connecting with our experiences, with a sense of self, a sense of place, a sense of presence in the world, the sense of awe that we receive. And I think a big part of psychedelic experiences are giving people those glimpses of awe. And to me, it's just the richness of life. It does come with work because, like you say, this world doesn't always necessarily reward sensitivity. In many ways, it says you should be tough and you shouldn't cry and you shouldn't be so emotional. And I think that's shifting a lot. Like even in the corporate world, emotional intelligence is one of the most commonly taught skills now, right? So I think that's changing. But it does require, there's a term in Buddhism, it's bodhicitta. And what that means is open heart. And when you talk about being in bodhicitta, it's saying that you are open to all experience. You're not just open to the good stuff, you're open to the stuff that breaks your heart. Because to be in touch with your heart is to have your heart broken over and over, and to understand that's just beauty and that's just part of love, right? And to stop labeling the experiences, but to just feel it all. And so I think when you start to become sensitive, hopefully that you also have some instruction and some support around how to allow energy to move through you so that you don't feel like everything that comes at you, you have to take on. I don't have to take on everything I read in the news, and I don't need to take on somebody who's upset. Like I run into somebody and they're upset. I don't need to take that energy on. But if you're sensitive, you're going to feel that energy, and you need to learn to let it travel through you and pass through you and release that energy, because it's not yours to hold anyway. So there's complexity in that. The simplest way to say it is I could have just skipped this whole answer and said it's the gift of life.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I loved your answer. It was beautiful. And I really relate to that. I think as a self-diagnosed, highly sensitive person, when I did allow myself to just own my sensitivity and see it as a gift and see like the depth of emotions that I feel as a gift, I feel like it really allowed me to start seeing who I am and what I have to offer to the world as a gift rather than the burden that it's always felt like it has. And I think 5-MeO really brought out a much deeper layer of that for me.
Yeah, like I remember you messaging and saying something about just this unlocking of creativity, and like it just unlocks all the energy that's stored within you. Is that right? And I think you don't get that without being sensitive to your system and to the energy within you. The only other thing I would say about sensitivity is that it's also a practice of learning to notice when you're in resistance or when you're attached to certain feelings. And sensitivity becomes way more challenging if you are constantly in resistance or clinging to certain experiences or energy, because when we just allow everything to flow naturally, sensitivity can be intense, but it's not prolonging challenging moments by becoming attached to them or by resisting them. Yeah, I think there's lots of ways to practice being in sensitivity. And there's lots of amazing work. Like Pema Chodron's work is really beautiful at talking about the gift of sensitivity. Like When Things Fall Apart is just one of my favorite books. And it speaks a lot to this. It speaks a lot to just sitting in the discomfort of love. And I had an experience recently with a few members of my family where something happened that was deeply heartbreaking. And it was such an interesting moment because I could practice what I preach, and I could just see my psyche going, oh yeah, you should get really mad at them, and you should do this, and you should maybe not call them, or you should shut down, basically. And to me, it felt like the absolute opposite of what I wanted to do. What I really needed to do was to feel how heartbreaking this moment was because of how much I love these people. And when you love somebody that much, they can hurt you that much. And that's okay. That's just what happened. And to just lean into loving them even more. And I don't get to love them that much. I don't get to feel that love at the best of times if I'm not able to feel it at the hardest of times. And it was such an interesting exploration of practicing that, because I talk about it to people all the time. And when things aren't challenging with the people that love you, it's easy to love people when they're being great. And when something goes sideways or something is challenging, I just could see it. I could because I think about it all the time, I could just feel my heart clenching. I could just feel it closing down. And it was just this practice of saying, no, what's the opposite reaction of that? How do I open even further to this moment? How do I allow this energy to pass through me and release it?
Yeah, the name of your retreat, Awaken to Life. All
exactly.
Of it. Yeah, beautiful. So at this point, people listening are probably pretty tuned in that this can be a very challenging medicine in a lot of ways, and that maybe not for everyone. And I know that you mentioned to me that you actually screen out a lot of people, that maybe not a lot. I think you said 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people that want to come to Enfold. How does someone know that they're ready for 5-MeO, or what do you look for?
I think the biggest thing is a commitment to the process that this medicine opens up. And so I think it's really important that people have the capacity to do the work afterwards, that it really is clear to them that this doesn't end when you leave our intensive, right? Like when you leave our intensive, I feel like it just begins. And so I think it's making sure that people are prepared for that and have capacity for that. Like they have enough resources and they can make some time. If somebody says to me, yeah, I want to come to your intensive, but right after that, I've got 6 weeks of business travel and it's going to be really intense. I say, don't come after that. Let me know. Come when you have some time. And not that people do go back to work and get back to regular life, but there's a process that happens that you need to be prepared for. I think the other component is just that are people at a point in their spiritual and personal journey that they're ready for the level of truth that this medicine provides, and that it's not going to be such a rude awakening that it creates dysregulation or unhealthy dysregulation. Because I think part of 5-MeO is this is a dysregulating experience by its very nature. And I think people just need to be at a point in their personal journey that they're ready for that. And it can be hard to predict exactly. But I think what we try and do in our screening when we talk to people the first time is just lay it all out, say all the worst case stuff that can happen. You need to be really prepared for this. We call it the anti-sales call. And this is all the stuff that you need to be aware of that might happen. And some of the stuff I tell you is only going to happen to 1 in 20 people, but you could be that one. And that you have to be able to be ready to take a certain level of responsibility on, because this experience is ultimately your experience. So I think that's mostly it. Like we work with quite a few people who have never done psychedelics before, but they've done a lot of other spiritual or therapeutic work or coaching work or inquiry. So it's not necessarily a prerequisite, though I think that it's better if you've done work with mushrooms or work with ayahuasca or LSD or MDMA, like some of the more common psychedelics. It pairs really beautifully with iboga and ibogaine, but mostly that this isn't like the first step on someone's spiritual journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the listeners will know if they listen to my trip report of my experience at Enfold that I really connected to your space holding and the facilitation that you and Austin serve. I think it had a lot to do with my own trust in fully going there and like opening up to the medicine. And for me, it's just very clear that you both work in a really beautiful space of integrity. And I'm curious, with a medicine like 5-MeO that doesn't really have a lineage or like an elder to report to or to get permission to serve from, right? Like, how do you two stay accountable and operate ethically? Because I think I do see that in you. There is this accountability with yourselves. And I'm curious how you manage that without, like a lineage or an elder to report to, because there's a lack of it with this medicine. How do you operate ethically, stay accountable, and really keep your container so clean when doing this work?
Yeah, there's probably a few ways that we try to maintain that. One is that we have a handful of folks that are advisors to us, and a few in particular we've basically asked them to say, we need you to watch what we say, watch what we do, watch how we present ourselves, and to really call us out or call us in if you see something that just doesn't feel right. And I would say that we've also tried to expand our network of people serving this medicine, which has been frankly tricky to find people that we deeply resonate with, though there are a few that we know now. But I'd say there's people from other medicine spaces that we connect with and speak with often. One of the guys I speak with fairly regularly is Justin at Myco Meditations. And I just feel like we hold very similar ideas about the responsibility of doing this work. And folks like that, there's a number of folks. So that's one component. The other component is that I really feel like our orientation to this working with 5-MeO actually comes from more of a Buddhist lineage, not necessarily a religious Buddhist lineage, but a philosophical one. And so we've done a lot of work in those spaces, in mindfulness, in meditation, in other types of therapeutic trainings. I don't think it has to come directly from the medicine specifically, because so much of what we're doing is outside of that. That's a component of it. And then I think partly it's just our lifestyle and our relationship. So first of all, Austin and I are pretty darn honest with one another and hold each other to a pretty high bar in terms of doing this work. And we see things, we have very similar values, but we actually approach this work with a pretty different lens. And so it's actually quite helpful as long as we can remember that it's a gift that we might do things differently and not just get mad at each other. it's a real gift to have each other's reflection on how to approach different circumstances. And we're constantly talking about that. But there's also an aspect of our lifestyle where we only do so many retreats at any given time. We really generally don't do more than 2 a month and 20 a year, which is part of having the spaciousness to reflect and to learn and not be burnt out, and to have space for all of our guests so that we're on call for them and they can message us and we can support them. Our lifestyle is like very much a sober one. We don't drink. We don't really do much, even of psychedelics. We don't have that much time for it, but we spend a lot of time very grounded in a lot of reflection, living very quiet lives. And I just think that's part of the nervous system mastery that's required to do this work at a high level. And so that when things do arise that are charged or that are challenging, we are resourced to respond to them. And we're not so tired or so burnt out. There's just a lot of people working with medicines that are doing medicine all the time. Frankly, they're doing drugs all the time, right? You become very ungrounded easily. We don't consume any medicine when serving. There's a lot of people serving 5 that consume 5 while serving. I think that's a very challenging dynamic. And I'm not here to say what's right or wrong, but for us, that feels totally unnecessary and just a wild risk to take because it's so ungrounding, right? So there's lots of little aspects of how we think about this to try and stay as grounded and as clear-minded as possible, and hopefully have good people around us that let us know when they feel like something's out of boundary, and just constantly trying to reflect and learn, and lots of things.
It sounds like you have both made a lot of sacrifices to really commit your life to serving this medicine.
I really think that leading these intensives it's such demanding energetic work. And I really think of it like being a pro athlete or something like that. If you're in the NBA, you play a certain amount of games a year, but outside of that, there's a lifestyle that goes along with being able to perform at that level. And I'm not saying it's like an athletic thing that we do, but energetically, spiritually, physically as well. Like we are on the ground on a mat for 10 hours during ceremony days. So there is a physical component, but more so just an energetic and nervous system component that I think to do this work at a very high level, you have to consider your lifestyle all the way around it. We can't be out drinking and doing drugs and living some sort of wild lifestyle and then expecting our nervous system to be super present and calm and be able to co-regulate with someone. It just wouldn't work.
I think that really shows your devotion and commitment to the work that you're doing in the world. And it's so inspiring and so beautiful, and such an honor to support you both in your commitment to sharing this medicine with the world.
Thank you, Lana. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. I want to address the photos and videos. So I made a post when I shared my first episode, and I shared a couple of clips from ceremony. So you and Austin have made the decision to record photos and videos of your guests with their permission. I loved it. There was a couple spicy comments though on that video of people very concerned about capturing such a sacred moment, and like 95% of the comments, and there was a lot, were like very beautiful, but there was a few, spicy comments around that. So I want to address this. Why did you guys come to this decision to record moments of ceremony? And why is it important for you to do that and share that with your guests? And then also, how do you navigate introducing technology and documentation into such a sacred container?
Yeah, you could see that some people had mixed feelings about anything being captured at all. And then the idea of it being shared on the internet. There's a very interesting, I saw that, I read a lot of those comments. It was a very interesting thread. So basically, when people come to our experience, they're basically informed multiple times ahead of time that if they would like, we will capture some photos and videos, just short little clips and things like that. And it's totally up to people's consent. And some people say, I don't want anything captured. And of course, that's fine with us. And sometimes people will say, I want it captured, but I don't know if I want them. So don't send them to me right away. And that's fine. And we don't share them. They are completely for our guest, right? They're completely for you as the participant. They're not for us in any way. We don't use them for anything otherwise. But so it's important to say all that. But what we found is that because the experience is so intense, and because there's moments of the experience where there is no you there, this non-dual experience component, we felt like it was really useful for the person to be able to understand what happened to some degree. Like, what did my body do? What sound did I make? What came out of me energetically? There's something really interesting about that. And for some folks, they have a total memory blank of the entire ceremony, even the light doses. Like it's too intense for the mind, and the mind just says that didn't happen. For those folks, it can also feel like they have a real trouble connecting to the experience in any way, which can be really challenging for integration. So we find that this helps them just see a little bit more of their process and their experience. So I think it's like really helpful. And then there's also some aspect where people see a certain level, like a certain type of expression. Maybe people shake their hands or a certain sound they make. And I think that can be really informative for the integration process or for an ongoing practice for somebody that interesting. That's the sound that when I make that sound, I can resonate with my body. And that's something that people can do as an ongoing somatic release practice. So it often helps inform people of how their body naturally expresses itself. And then they can actually do that in a sober state as well. So we've just found it to be really helpful. We also have some people who use their videos as a way to reconnect with a certain sense of a certain moment. And they use that before meditations or before a breathwork session to help them drop in. We try to do it in a really subtle way. So I'm never like in your face taking photos, or I try to make sure that you're not really aware of it as best as possible. And if the person is really requiring a certain level of interaction or support, we just put it down. Like it's a secondary objective to actually being completely present with the person.
I found them to be so valuable during integration. I think for 2 weeks straight, I watched them every single day. And
Right.
It gave so much context to what I experienced and to what happened. And I had the whiteout experience for probably 70, 80% of the time I was with you guys. So it was like incredible to see the intensity of the releases. Yeah, I'm really grateful that you decided to do that.
Yeah. And for the most part, there's a lot of people that are unsure if they want it, but almost always they're grateful to have it. And some people afterwards, they come out and they go, you know what? I know I said to take those photos, but I don't want them. And we just delete them. That's fine. There's also the aspect of the music in our session will also create playlists for people so that they can come back to the music that was used throughout their session. It's funny the way you framed it is integrating technology into the ceremony, because we also take notes digitally on an iPad so that we have full recollection and we can give people notes on and what they said and all these kind of things. So I think technology is a core piece of how we work in the ceremony. Of course, we try to be minimalist about it and not have it be too interruptive or something like that. But yeah, I could totally see that. It's part of the Enfold experience for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So I want to get into some integration and talk about the reactivations, which was so surprising to me. The reactivations. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I was not prepared for that. Can you tell people what that is, how common they are, how they can occur, and when? Sure. Yeah. Reactivations, I'd say they happen to, I don't know how many, maybe half people or maybe even a little less. It's like everybody has reactivations. So it's hard to say. And I feel as our work has gotten better and deeper, better may be the wrong word, but I feel like our process is deeper, that people are having more reactivations. I think it's often connected to the level of energy suppression that's been existing in the body previous. And in your case, I know that you had some like early experience being in a war zone as a like small child. And this is like very early experiences of trauma and energy. And so we often find that the younger and the more intensive trauma might be, the more chance that there's going to be reactivations. But that doesn't always necessarily track. And what a reactivation is essentially an experience of being back in the peak of the 5-MeO experience. And it's usually happening at night. It's usually happening as people drift off to sleep or at the peak of a sleep cycle. So throughout the night, when there's a moment in our sleep cycle when we're very close to awake. And it's like in this transitionary phase of consciousness where suddenly something in our subconscious pops and we're back in the ceremony. And this can be, for some people, physical. They can have physical reactivations where their whole body is shaking or sweating, or you wake up sounding or clenching, or all sorts of physical responses. Sometimes it's very blissful for people. They wake up, they have this moment of being back in this unity space, and then they come back. There can be intellectual downloads like memories or ideas or concepts get put together. So like information can be there. And for some people, it happens once or twice the night of their ceremony and then it doesn't happen again. For others, it can happen every night for a few days. For people who have very intense integration processes, it can happen for every night for weeks. And then for others, it can happen more intermittently, where I think you had some experiences. You had a whole bunch the week of, but then you've continually had a few. What's worth mentioning is that 5-MeO completely metabolizes out of the body within 3 hours. So this is not a drug reactivation. This is literally some kind of subconscious process of working through the experience and some kind of unconscious, subconscious process happening. It can be very different for different people. Tell me about yours.
That's what's so crazy, is that the drug is completely out of your body. Yeah. So I was going to book a call with you or try to talk with you about this, but I was like, you know what? I'm interviewing Steve. I may as well have this conversation on the podcast so that the listeners can benefit from it as well. But yeah, I guess I've had 2 really significant reactivations while under the influence of other psychedelics. So the first one was about a month. It was New Year's around that time. And I was seeing one of my favorite drum and bass artists. And I didn't even go too heavy on the substances. I think I was just smoking weed that night. And I was just like really feeling the music. And I was like, I'm going to smoke a little bit of DMT. And I took the smallest amount, so teeny tiny. It was so tiny. And I closed my eyes. And I was just immediately back in the 5-MeO space, to the point where my friend actually gifted me this DMT pen. I was like, did she give me NN-DMT or 5-MeO DMT? Like, I actually had to question it after. But essentially what happened was I was in an event venue, and it wasn't really like a safe space. It wasn't like a harm reduction informed space. It was just like a really big venue, History in Toronto. Closed my eyes and I experienced oneness in that space. But it was like heavy bass music and a lot of energy and like a lot of people. And it was way too much. So luckily my friend was there, and I turned to her and I was like, I need help. You need to take me outside. I'm having a 5-MeO reactivations. I get outside and go to the nearest tree. And I was just holding the tree. And as I was holding the tree, I was having like auditory releases similar to the 5 ceremony. And that just played out for maybe 5 minutes.
A couple of things about that.
Yeah.
One is that we always remind people that you're going to be much more sensitive to substances. And I think often
much more sensitive,
way more sensitive, right? A DMT vape is one thing, but even cannabis, people underestimate cannabis, and often people have a relationship with cannabis, so they think, oh, that's not a big deal. But there seems to be some sort of very synergistic relationship between 5-MeO and cannabis, that cannabis can be very reactivating for people. And so I think it's really important that people know that after 5-MeO, you're going to be, and maybe forever, but for definitely for a number of months, you're going to be much more sensitive to substances. So to be very careful as you ease back in. Yeah. And there's something about 5-MeO. Once you've done 5-MeO, it can augment psychedelics forever, all psychedelics.
Yeah. That's what I'm finding. And yeah, I thought I was going easy. I was like, oh, I'm like taking it really easy and chill and light. And it was just like right back in that space. And so the second reactivation was much more intense than that one. It actually happened a couple days ago. I was at a cottage celebrating my birthday with friends. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to take it easy. I just did 1 tab of acid for the entire day. And the day played out and everything was fine and great. I even made dinner for us. And it was the very tail end, the last 2 hours. And I did smoke a little bit of cannabis. So maybe that's what really did reactivate it. But it was the very tail end. And I was at this cottage with all of my friends, and my friend was DJing, and we made the space beautiful, and we were eating beautiful food. And I was just like so overwhelmed by gratitude and love. And I went to the altar that we created, and I was just really connecting with the love and gratitude I was feeling. And then my torso started spinning involuntarily. And I went to my friend Carolina, who I told you about, who holds space for people. And I was like, something's happening. I don't know what's happening, but something's changing. Something really big is happening. And then I started to talk to her and my other friend about 5-MeO and integration, and literally just talking about it caused me to start having, like a physical 5-MeO purge, and like the scream, I was screaming and like releasing. And then I was just like, I need the music to stop. And my friend was like playing again, like heavy bass music. And I was just like, I need it to stop. And then luckily Carolina was there, and I was just like anchored to her. And I was just like telling her that I was scared. And I felt that I was about to lose grip and never be able to come back. I was like, I'm going to lose myself and I'm never going to be able to come back again. I really felt like I was going to just be forever gone. And finally, everyone was holding a really beautiful space for me. And my friends started playing the handpan, and they were like really helping me work through it. My body felt like it was pure energy. I didn't feel my body. And then I did this like mudra intuitively, and that helped me hold the energy. And finally things started like coming back. And then this like song just came out of my mouth. It was like very shamanic sounding, like they're like it was sounds like that, but it was just coming out. And then after that passed, I was just like, I'm coming back. And then it just felt like all the energy was like crashing. And then I was finally back in my body, and I started crying. Yeah. It very much felt like a 5 experience. And it felt like what the whiteout would have felt like if I remembered it.
Wow. And so that was how long after your...
Over 2 months.
Over 2 months, right?
Yeah. Because I was with you guys mid-November. It's end of January. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's such... I'm so grateful that you've been transparent about your process and the experience. Like the recap episode you did, I thought the way you shared on your social was really connected and powerful and honest as well. And sharing these types of experiences are so important, because this medicine is, you just can't play. You cannot play with it.
Yo, 5-MeO is serious.
Yeah, you can't play. And I think for some folks, it's less pronounced because they're able to suppress more of the process. But I really think that it takes a level of evolution to be as open as you've been through your integration process, open energetically. When you tap into that level of sensitivity, that's part of the reason why we don't really do substances very much, unless once in a while, a couple times a year, we love to dance with MDMA or something like that. Like, I have no problem. I have no judgments or beliefs about anything like that. It's just more so like when you're in this medicine, it's so sensitive. And so you got to be really careful. And I do think it's interesting that cannabis came up again. It does strike me that cannabis has, I don't know why that is. I don't know any of the chemistry or the science there, but it's very clear that it has a very strong relationship. And to be super mindful. It's so great that in that experience, you were in a smaller environment with trusted people. My guess is that part of the reason it went so deep there as well is that you were in that environment, that you did have that level of psychic safety and emotional safety in that environment, and that you tapped into this sense like that. It sounds like the conduit for that was the depth of gratitude and love that you were feeling.
Yes. Which was what I was feeling in the ceremony with you and Austin, right? I was just overwhelmed with love and gratitude. And I think it was actually maybe not even the cannabis or the LSD. I think it actually was that like overwhelming feeling that triggered the 5-MeO experience to come back, which is so wild. Because we're talking about like sensitivity and the depth of feeling. And I just feel like this really sacred and beautiful and mysterious process is unfolding for me right now as a result of sitting with this medicine. And I don't know where it's going, but I honestly feel like my DNA has changed. And that's what I was talking about with Carolina and Jameson right before I got triggered back into it. I was like, I feel like my DNA has changed. And I almost started like glitching, like my body started glitching, and I was like glitching in the way that I was talking. Like it was, I feel like this medicine has really changed me at the core.
That's
the feeling, not scientific or anything, but
No, I get that. Like I just have a level of sensitivity now that I just didn't used to have. And I think it's important also from a harm reduction lens or just from a sense of being aware of this is that when this medicine can connect us to this non-dual awareness and it becomes much closer, like we're like you were tapping into the sense of gratitude and love, and suddenly you just start to dissolve. It's really important that we are very careful when we are that close to that space, that we continually ground, that we don't become unhinged from the fact that we are humans who have things to do and bills to pay and people to take care of and stomachs to fill with food. And you see it a lot in this space where people are just chasing big experience after big experience. And that's where you start to see people being quite unhinged. And I think you get into some pretty unhealthy spaces, and it can feel really beautiful in those spaces because you're just, everything is love and oneness all the time. But ultimately the objective is to be close enough to that in your absolute sober life that you can respond to your regular life from that place and not just escape to that place, and to basically to build that relationship. It's the classic saying in Zen Buddhism that what happens after enlightenment, you chop wood and you carry water, you go back and do your thing as a human.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I love that you shared that. I hope more people can be aware of that, because there's also a lot of people doing 5-MeO in these settings where you go to some retreat and you do it 7 days in a row, 7 high dose days in a row, and like a lot of wild stuff happening, which feels very high risk. Certain people have a very rigid psyche and they need more loosening. And other people have a more loose and open psyche and need more grounding, and just to find some balance there. Like I'm naturally, like I started this journey as an exceptionally rigid mind that I can take a lot of dysregulation and still land. And so I'm more on that end of the spectrum. But I would say Austin is much more connected in presence and much more ethereal, or like much more connected to a different space, that she has to be more careful about substances because she's going to be a balloon that just floats off into space if she's not careful. She has a very grounded nature too, but it's just a bit of a difference there.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate that. And after these reactivations that happened, it really made me realize that, just how serious of a medicine this is, and also how much space it needs for integration. And 2 months in, it helped me recommit to the integration process. I had an opportunity to do some more medicine in a couple of weeks, and I was like, nope, not right now. That would not be honoring this experience. So it was really surprising to me just how powerful it is. And it's definitely not one to mess around with.
And it's sneaky too, because it's not like you're tripping every day, or it's not like you're deep in it, but it comes and it goes, and it comes in waves, and you have experiences where suddenly something just clicks and you're very emotional, or it really does come in waves for a number of months for sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, thanks for letting me. Last question. Actually, I have 2 questions. We'll see how we do with time. So there's a quote from Tryptamine Palace that I highlighted, and then I also noticed it was on your website. So I want to just read that and get your thoughts on it. Yeah, he said, "These days, when I knock on the doors of Tryptamine Palace, I am reminded of the responsibility that comes with ultimate knowledge, an undeniable responsibility to myself, to my tribe, to my species, and to my planet." Yeah. So what do you think about this and the responsibility that he's talking about here?
Yeah, to me, this circles back to what we were talking about in what do you do with a non-dual experience, or this, once you have this experience of connection with unity. To me, the healthiest response is that, to be in service to life, to be in service to love, to be in service to that knowing. And to me, responsibility, the other word I would use is the opportunity to be in that space of giving and service. It is the ultimate healing power when we realize that when we can be in service, it helps us. Like so often we get so caught up in our own psychology that we're trying to fix and heal and feel better. And in so many cases, if we simply oriented ourselves to volunteering and to helping others and to being kind in the street and to simple acts of service, how healing that is and how much that gives us purpose and connection. And so that's what that statement means to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And last question. Yeah. Your retreat, your intensive is called Awaken to Life. Yeah. And I really do feel that I awakened to life after that. So I think it's a very fitting name. What does it mean for you to awaken to life?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. So we stopped calling our experiences retreats and started calling them intensives because they are very much a very intensive process. And we also realized that this is the opposite of retreating. And the idea of retreating is like pulling back. And 5-MeO is really doing the opposite. It's awakening to life. It's stepping towards life. Like we talked about the sensitivity, it's stepping into sensitivity, to open-heartedness, to tender-heartedness, to full presence with every moment of our lives. And that is an orientation we hope to help people discover for themselves in their own way and express it in their own ways. So awakening to life is really about awakening to the gift of life, to awakening to the gift that every moment offers.
Beautifully said. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners today? You've already shared so much, but anything else before I let you go today?
I do want to say again, I think that the work that you've done in how you present these medicines and your experience and share it from a personal standpoint, but also bring in all these informed voices is like a real gift to the space. And I'm just grateful, and we're grateful for the relationship and to know you and to know your heart, to have seen your heart. And yeah, just grateful for this opportunity. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Steve. And the feeling is so mutual. I'm in awe, honestly, of the gratitude I feel to know both you and Austin. It's just, it's been so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And where can people get in touch with you, find you, learn more about Enfold?
Yeah, our website is enfold.org, enfold.org. We're online at Enfold Institute on Instagram and YouTube. We have a whole bunch of great videos on YouTube about 5-MeO DMT that are just educational and talk about integration and talk about all those aspects. You can find me anywhere at Steve Rio. I'm pretty easy to find. And then also, I always like to mention that I have a bunch of music and breathwork sessions that are all free and available on streaming services, Spotify and whatnot. So you can either go to Steve Rio on Spotify or just search for my name on streaming, and you'll find a whole bunch of free sessions that are really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, they are beautiful. Yeah.
And they're fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everything that you do and everything that you're creating and have created and will continue to create.
And thanks for you as well.
Yeah. Such an honor. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Yeah, blessings.
Thank you so much for listening to and supporting the show. To stay in touch, sign up for my mailing list, which can be found in the show notes or on modernpsychedelics.net. If this episode sparked something within, please let me know by leaving a review of the Modern Psychedelics podcast on Apple and Spotify. This really helps to share these messages with those who need them, which is the whole reason why I do what I do. And if you haven't already, come join the ongoing conversation over on Instagram with other beautiful souls. We have an incredible and conscious community over at the handle Modern Psychedelics. And don't forget that the work begins after you come back down to earth. And I'm standing shoulder to shoulder, doing it with you. This episode is produced in collaboration with Film with Integrity. They are a values-forward production studio providing end-to-end production from concept to content. They do event video, documentary series, commercial and marketing videos, and of course, podcast production. If you are working on a project that deserves quality of production and content without sacrificing heart and soul, visit filmwithintegrity.com to check out their beautiful work and get in touch with their team.